I will also tell you that and this is me giving you some full warning of what's coming up in terms of a difficult conversation for us to have. Right now, we're going to be funding a number of the capital improvements from the potential gas well revenues that come from underneath Forest Park and the zoo. An example of some of the things that we could potentially fund, and they have to be capital improvements, can't go to any kind of zoo salary or anything like that. They have to be an actual structure that we build. One of the things that I most would like to see is Colonial Parkway, where it narrows down to a very tight 2 lanes, and if you've ever seen people trying to push strollers across it while you've got multiple lanes of traffic, that's a disaster waiting to happen. We either need to expand that bridge over the creek, or we need to create a bike and pedestrian bridge that's separate from that. That is something that we could conceivably fund from any gas royalties that we get. Here's the challenge. In order to produce from there, Chesapeake would have to come from the Merrimack site that's off of University Drive, come south underneath the river, get that gas out, but then they have to be able to then pipeline it out to where they sell it on the market. And the 121 Southwest Parkway expansion basically makes it so that they're not able to go north up to their alignment at the Union Pacific Railroad. So what they're asking to do is to come from the Trinity Tree site, the Pearson site that they call it, come south, basically underneath the edge of the Colonial Golf Course and Rogers Road, and they want to come along the northern edge of Colonial Parkway and dig a trench. And that impacts trees. And I don't want them digging up trees. In fact, I asked them to go out and do a survey, and I think some of you probably may have seen their surveyors out there in the course of last week doing an assessment on what, if any, trees would have to be taken out for them to do that. And in order for them to produce underneath the zoo, and actually for Park Hill to get their gas royalties and things like that, they have to figure out a way to get it out and back over to where their current pipeline is over by Trinity Trees. I don't know how they're going to do that, and I don't know that we're going to be able to come to an agreement, because I don't want to see that parkland disturbed. I don't want to see those 100-year-old trees taken out. But then again, I also want those capital improvements like fixing that bridge and doing some things at the zoo. I want to see that happen. So they've made some asks. I basically have said, your proposal right now is not acceptable. You're going to have to come back with something else, and they are working on what is that something else. But that's one of those tough decisions. Do we fix some of these things in Forest Park and the zoo with gas royalty monies? Or do we not and say we're going to deal with it at a future time and not let them take out potentially trees? And again, they're doing an assessment on what, if any, trees would have to be taken out by doing this trench along Colonial Parkway. That brings me to, and we talked about the zoo, the contract negotiation that we had happened completely outside the realm of any kind of public involvement. And I understand that contract negotiations, typically the city manager, when he or in the future she, hopefully, has a negotiation, they negotiate that out basically in private and to the point that they have a draft and then it's voted on, and at that point it becomes public. I understand that. But I think the zoo contract is endemic of a shifting away from investing our neighborhoods in a public process. I think those of us on city council, some of us on city council, have gotten perhaps kind of gun shy. And it allows for kind of this attitude of, well, it's just going to be easier if we just go ahead and vote on it. If we just go ahead and put it on the agenda and we take care of it. That may be easier, but all of you are not well served by that. And I will, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I'm really worried about what that does to Fort Worth. On not just contract negotiations, but all sorts of things. Neighborhoods, particularly in District 9, neighborhoods are very active and they want to have a vested role in what's going on in our city. And if we're not affording them the venue to do that, and I've heard people default to things like, oh, well, you know, the League of Neighborhoods, they do forums and they do sessions. Well, the number of neighborhood associations that are actually members of the League of Neighborhoods is amazingly small. It's like 10 or 15% of the neighborhoods in the city of Fort Worth are actual members of the League of Neighborhoods or involved in some way. And so my commitment, or what I would like to say to you guys is we're not doing a good job as a city. And that's one of the conversations that I'm starting to have with all of my council colleagues. And I think this district is the most important in leading that conversation because you have the most active neighborhoods. You have a lot more active neighborhoods than some of my colleagues do. I hear from you a lot more than some of my colleagues hear from their neighborhoods. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing. And I need for you, when you talk to your neighbors in Meadowbrook or on the west side or on the far north side or things like that, and you talk to neighborhood leaders, say, what kind of public discourse do you have about these city issues? And I think that it's incumbent upon us, and it's incumbent upon me as your elected representative to take this up as a cause in the course of the next few months. And I've done a lot of thinking about that, and I think that we have done a woefully short job as a city government in investing you guys in the public process for the really tough decisions. Just telling you to go to a Parks Board meeting. Jim Marshall is your Parks Board representative, by the way, and thank you, Jim, for serving in that capacity. I know there's days that you'd rather just beat your head against a wall than have to go to that, but I appreciate your service on the Parks Board. But to say, oh, well, there was a Parks Board meeting about that, you could have gone and testified at that. We need to be having specific meetings about these specific issues. We need to put out word. We need to not just put it on the city page in a little paragraph. We need to be sending you information in your mailbox so that you know that's going on. And in terms of these kind of larger institutions like the zoo, like TCU, like the Southwestern Baptist Seminary that's also in the district I represent, I've heard a lot of concerns from neighborhoods about, well, for example, by TCU, I've got students parking in front of my house. I've got, 5 unrelated people living in a 2-bedroom house next door, and they're all students, and they have big parties until the evening. Well, one of the things that I will be doing over the course of the next few months is arranging with the zoo, with TCU, and with the Baptist Seminary to basically do a series of neighborhood summits, to do a zoo neighborhood summit, to do a TCU neighborhood summit, and to do a Baptist Seminary neighborhood summit, to basically sit down with the people who not only are the executives, but board members of those institutions, and not only the executives of your neighborhood associations, but the members, the residents, and say, okay, we've heard these various issues of concern over the course of recent months and years, and we've seen some of them addressed and we've seen some of them not so well addressed. How can we improve that process? So basically next fall, I plan on it's going to be difficult to do that before the summer gets here and people go on vacation and things like that. But I've already been in communication with the leadership of these institutions to make an ask that we do a Saturday morning, all-day meeting, whatever, maybe an evening type thing, to really address some of these things. So I wanted to let you know that that is coming up. I also will continue to do, I don't know if you know, but I do neighborhood office hours every third Thursday where I go out to some location somewhere. Probably the most successful one I've ever done is the 8th Avenue Fiesta Supermarket. I also had a really good one at La Grande Plaza too. This is the final one of the first 12 that I scheduled. Is coming up this coming third Thursday of May, and it is at the new, I just went blank, Tom Strue's new development over off of Samuels is called De Leon, Villa De Leon, thank you. It's going to be at Villa De Leon from 3 to 7, third Thursday. I forget the date of that. I found that destination ones don't really work out very well. People don't really plan to go there, but if it's somewhere that they would go anyway, like a grocery store or something like that, those are great. And it's an opportunity, I mean, a lot of people, A, may not know where City Hall is, B, don't know where to park when they get there. Once they get there and get parked, they have to go through a metal detector that's not exactly a very friendly process, and then they have to figure out where the third floor is to come up for a meeting. People don't like going downtown, but that doesn't mean that they don't have issues, that they don't need their elected officials to deal with. And so this has been kind of a nice little ability to get a pulse on things. And I'll admit, sometimes people just come and act crazy and have all kinds of issues, and some of them are not all that rational, and I sit there and I listen, and it gives me a pulse on what their concerns are. And some people come forward with great, wonderful ideas. Oftentimes it's just, I've got a code issue. I've got high grass in the yard next to mine. I've got a guy who parks his 18-wheeler on a residential street. I got stuff like that. We have our laptop with a wireless card, quickly triage it, send a couple of messages on a BlackBerry, and we get those things done. So I'll continue to do that throughout the coming year, third Thursday. I'm going to do it mostly at grocery stores and things like that because I think that's just where people like to go.